cooperation in Northeast Asia. Today, we have an excellent list of experts on energy and science from China, Russia, Mongolia, and Korea. And this session has been organized with the support of Global Energy Prize Association and also the Association from Korea for Scientists. And so it is my great pleasure. My name is Rae-Kwon Jung. I am the member of International Award Committee of Global Energy Prize. And Global Energy Prize has been working hard to promote, to solve the issues of energy and to promote the energy science for the well-being of the world. And so it is my great pleasure. We have only 1.5 hour very tight scheduled session. And my goal in this session is to manage the time management so that we can finish exactly on time by 11:30. But we have a very challenging task because we have a long list of speakers and panelists. And in order to keep the time, actually I prepared a long opening statement, but I will skip my opening statement to save time, to give more time to our expert and panelists. And everybody knows that there's a huge potential for energy cooperation in Northeast Asia. We have known about it for a long time, and there has been already many proposals, interesting proposals from every corner of the world. And it's like Northeast Asia Supergrid, which was proposed last year by President Moon Jae-in, and there are other proposals, interesting proposals. But these proposals still needs to be promoted, and we need to take action. And especially today, we have very eminent scientists and experts, especially from Russia, the president of Russian Science of Academy, and I expect that naturally we will focus on the role of science, how can the scientists can support the energy cooperation ideas and proposals in the Northeast Asia. So now, cutting short my introductory statement, I'd like to directly go into the presentations of our panelists. And first, I'd like to invite Mr. Hong-Peng Liu. He's a director of Energy Division in UN-ESCAP. UN-ESCAP is Economic and Social Commission for Asia Pacific, located in Bangkok, where I was also worked with Hong-Peng for a long time in Bangkok as a director there. So it is my great pleasure to invite Hong-Peng Liu to present from the UN's perspective how the countries in Northeast Asia can support and cooperate for energy cooperation. Just for remind you, about 5 years ago, 2013, we had Asia Pacific Energy Ministers meeting exactly on the same floor, and I was actually facilitating and organizing that session myself. So it was a big emotional return for after 5 years on the same topic for energy cooperation for Asia Pacific, but now it is for Northeast Asia. We have a more precise focus now. And with this introduction, I'd like to invite Hong-Peng Liu for your introduction. Hong-Peng, you have a floor for maybe 7-8 minutes. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chung, for the invitation and also for the introduction. As Mr. Chung mentioned, I also myself, when I worked for Mr. Chung at the energy section, we organized the first Asia Pacific Energy Ministers Conference in the same venue in 2013. That was the first energy ministers meeting under the United Nations framework in Asia Pacific. We also had a very fruitful discussion here for regional cooperation for energy in Asia Pacific. So today I'm very glad we come back here at the same venue and we talk about regional energy cooperation in Asia Pacific. So without further ado, I just want to start with the overview of energy situation in Northeast Asia. As we know, in Northeast Asia, we have most dynamic economies. And also, if you look at this chart from 1990 to 2015, we have this Northeast Asia, the 6 countries. Actually, if you look at the 6 countries, of course, China, you can see the economy and also the energy consumption, energy supply is really going up. few, even I can say it's probably compared to other countries, even globally, it's really outstanding to increase this energy demand and supply. And if you look at the electricity generation in Northeast Asia, you can also see many come from this increase of the economic growth, and also you see the generation is also going up. But still in Northeast Asia, we have some the issues for energy access, especially to access electricity, in particular in developing countries, if you see in DPRK and in Mongolia. So the electrification rate is still quite relatively low, and there's populations without access to electricity. So we need also to consider these issues. So in general, if I share with you this overall picture about energy self-sufficiency, you see in Northeast Asia, the 6 countries, we really have in a very good position to emphasize or to enhance more among those countries to work together for energy trading. If you see energy production and the total energy supply, so in in Northeast Asia, these 6 countries, I think 4 countries, they already have this deficit. So that means we need import from other countries. But within the 6 countries, we have also the energy-rich countries. So that's provide a great potential for Northeast Asia to strengthen the energy cooperation. So if you see in Asia Pacific, the top 5 energy importers by energy resources in 2015. That's China, Japan, India, Republic of Korea, and Singapore. So 3 of them are actually located in Northeast Asia. And even globally, the top 5 energy importers, 4 of them in Asia and 3 of them in Northeast Asia. And if you see, but currently there's a very low kind of energy trade among those countries. Take the example for electricity trade. If you see the electricity trade is mainly bilateral. It's between Russia and China, between China and Mongolia. But still there's a great potential like among the other countries of these 6 countries in Northeast Asia. So when we talk about the connectivity for regional cooperation, so what are the benefits we talk about it? So I think I listed just the 4 areas, but I think the benefit is much more for this kind of connectivity. One is to enhance the energy security. If you see the security, we mean both the supply security and also demand security. So for energy import country, we really need the supply security. For energy export country, we also need the security of demand. So I think that for both sides, we need energy security through this connectivity that's really can improve it. And secondly, to efficient use of resources to support sustainable economic growth. So if you see the distribution of the energy resources in Northeast Asia, it's imbalanced. So some of the countries, if you look at Russia, if you look at Mongolia, they have very good natural energy resources. Even China also have good resources. But if you see geographically, it's located in different areas. It's far from the energy load. So how we just use this connectivity to optimize these energy resources, that's one of the issues. And also, at the same time, we have a great renewable energy resources. That is where we have the potential through regional cooperation to improve it. And also the energy access issues I mentioned earlier. But since there are many reasons we do this connectivity for regional cooperation, but why it's not happened as we expected? Although there is a bilateral cooperation, but the multilateral, like more than 2 countries, still very in the preliminary stage. Mostly it's only on the plan. So why? So I list also 4 reasons. The first one is politically there's some kind of concerns and sensitivities, especially if you look at the Northeast Asia, the different areas, there's some political sensitivity for this kind of regional economic cooperation, in particular for energy. And secondly, there's different national priorities, which is not aligned to each other or synergize each other. And secondly, the regulatory kind of mechanism. There's no kind of regulatory framework to promote regional cooperation for energy, to promote interconnectivities. And third one is the technical issues, especially when you develop this kind of energy strategy and the plans, and the technology is not synchronized, the technology is not coordinated. And the last one is about economic and financial, because the upfront investment for large-scale transboundary energy infrastructure, which always need a huge investment, especially the upfront investment. But where the investment come from, how the private sector will be involved. And as Mr. Chung also mentioned at the opening, there are a lot of discussions and also ongoing initiatives for Northeast Asia, in particular for power grid connectivity. So since in Northeast Asia we talk about the connectivity, which include both power grid, which include the oil and the gas, but since this focus for my presentation, I really want to just focus on the power grid connectivity. If you look only for the power grid connectivity, we have a different kind of initiatives, like for the Northeast Asia super grid, and also Northeast Asia electric system ties, and the GOBITEC and Asian super grid, and also we have interconnections, international consortium on super grid for Northeast Asia, and also a strategy for Northeast Asia energy systems, which also developed by national institutions, by international organizations, by international kind of financing, even multilateral banks. But with this kind of initiatives, a lot of studies already going on. But what will be the implementation strategy? That's really a kind of, we think, a good kind of future kind of framework, but how can we just make it practical? How can we implement it? If you look at these different options, I think there are a lot of discussions, very good kind of technical kind of road for this connectivity. And especially after this Korean Peninsula's political kind of situation change, I can see a lot of this road comes through even the peninsula, the Korean Peninsula. That's save a lot of like investment. And if we look at the political support from the high level, the president of Russian Federation, President Putin, actually in 2016, exactly in this forum, also mentioned about to support Northeast Asia, the energy ring, to involve 6 countries, and also President Moon also supported this idea. They discussed how to collaborate. And also President Xi at the United Nations Summit also mentioned to build the international, the global energy connectivity framework, which mainly just to support the clean energy. And also China and the Korea Summit, which also mentioned about the power grid connectivity. Japan-Russia Summit, which also include Japan and the Russian power bridge. From Mongolian government, we have this GOBITEC, which already had some preliminary feasibilities. So I really think at that level, the political support is there. But how we do it? So I really think this is the chance we have to find what is the practical approach. Strategically, how we move forward. I think compared to other sub-regions, if you look at the Southeast Asia, the ASEAN, they have the ASEAN kind of master plan for connectivity, which include the ASEAN power grid, ASEAN pipeline. So I think that's really advanced. And compared to South Asia, even there's a SARC, which also support the connectivities in South Asia. In Central Asia, we see there's a CIS, Central Asia, which also talk about power connectivity. But Northeast Asia, currently we don't have a kind of intergovernmental mechanism to support energy cooperation, to support economic cooperation as a whole. But relatively we see, we are behind the other sub-region, but still there's also advantage. We have a later mover advantage. We can just take the lessons learned from other sub-regions to have a much more speed up our collaboration. And also we need to, based on the experiences from others, to come up with the consensus. How do we move forward with this connectivity? How do we establish a regional mechanism? At the same time, globally, if you look at the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, which is exactly to support sustainable energy as one of the key areas, and also the different kind of initiatives for regional cooperation, that's also promote kind of incentives for this kind of collaboration. For example, BRI, and also, for example, the new Northeast Asia kind of initiatives, and also the multilateral development agreement, which talk about trade in different sub-regions. So I really think, as I mentioned earlier, in Northeast Asia, we have the basis for bilateral cooperation. But now it's the time we move to the multilateral cooperation, and then we'll reach our ultimate goal, to have an integrated regional electricity market. So that will give us the opportunity we can go forward with this kind of regional cooperation to enhance our sustainable energy development in Northeast Asia. So if I can propose a few things, I also discussed with Mr. Chung, there are kind of a lot of, I think, good ideas. And especially we have our scientists here also. And based on the scientific discussion, I'm sure the optimization of renewable energy, of the sustainable energy resources in Northeast Asia provide for over 1,000 reasons for us to enhance energy connectivity. And we need to develop a kind of mechanism. For example, this kind of forum to discuss how we move forward, how different countries, especially the government, the private sector, the scientific research institute, the universities, all this should come up with the clear idea to move forward, to work together. And secondly, to foster this kind of regional energy power pooling market. If you look at Northeast Asia, we come from Japan and to the west part of Russia. So that's different time zones. That also gives us quite a flexibility. We shift the load of the power supply from one place to another with these geographic locations. That's really a complementary kind of potential for the power market. If we have a regional power market, I think the dispatch of electricity will have a much higher efficiency. And third one, we need more studies. So currently the study probably is mainly come from the different institutions, different organizations. But we need the government's involvement. We need what kind of government policies and strategies and to develop this kind of connectivity in Northeast Asia. And the fourth one is understand the importance of the regulatory framework. So the regulatory framework is really how to regulate this kind of regional market. If you look at the lessons learned from some the other region like Southeast Asia, the ASEAN, if you're from Central Asia, from SAARC, CIS, EPC, CIS, and also from the South Asia. I think the regulations and regulatory of the market is really a challenging issue. Even there's an agreement to establish a regional connectivity, a regional cooperation mechanism, but still, how do you set up the regulatory framework and how do you regulate the regional market is most important than the technology itself. And finally, we have to develop a kind of non-binding regional agreement. So I think intergovernmental agreement will have the highest level of the guidance for this kind of cooperation. And I also just want to mention what can we do from ESCAP side. We are the United Nations arm in Asia Pacific. We're really the neutral platform. So if you look at our experience to facilitate the intergovernmental agreement, we have this Asian Highway agreement which involved over 30 countries to agree on the Asian highway connectivity. And also we facilitated this trade agreement which also involved over 20 countries. So for energy, we are also thinking if we can work together from Northeast Asia, there are also Southeast Asia, Central Asia, and South Asia which already have different kind of mechanism. if we can go up to the regional level. So we will be willing to provide this kind of platform to facilitate this kind of discussion. At the same time, I also think we need a kind of policy dialogue before this agreement to understand the different thinkings, different ideas from government. We also need the scientists, to provide us the scientific studies and to provide a good technology and for this kind of collaboration. So I really think through this kind of collaboration for Northeast Asia, we really can have a good, very clear target. And we already have this kind of mechanism in Northeast Asia, and we have an annual Northeast Asia Energy Security Forum. We have Northeast Asia Regional Power Dialogue, which is going to be organized in Ulaanbaatar end of August. So I hope this kind of discussion will bring us more kind of insight discussion at Ulaanbaatar. And thank you very much for this opportunity. Thank you, Mr. Chung.
Okay. Well, thank you, Hong Peng. I think you laid an excellent basis for scoping work, for giving us a perspective for the whole area of we have to cover in our discussions. And now I'd like to invite Mr. Oleg Budargin. He is a vice chairman of the World Energy Council, and he's also a member of the board of trustee of the Global Energy Association. He is one of the excellent energy experts from Russia, and I'm sure he will lay the foundation for our discussions from Russia's perspective. Mr. Budargin, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Good morning. I'm glad to see all of you here, and I would like to extend my thanks for a very informative presentation, and I would like to add a couple of words. This is for the first time that the initiative of integrating Northeast Asia was formulated by our president on the 7th of September in 2 years ago here in Vladivostok. And after this very important initiative, which is based on experience of Russia on setting up of unified energy system, and in the future we will mark 100th anniversary of operating this system. So based on this very important experience, Russia can make such initiatives. The big work, a chunk of work has been done over this year by Russia, China, Mongolia, and South Korea, and Japan. On numerous occasions this topic was discussed. Now there's no ground to discuss. Everybody is willing and vying, and there's a political will to implement this project in practice. The more so that the experience of international experience is here, and in our case we can rely on a positive specificity of putting together the energy system. Many words were mentioned about the examples of such connectivity systems, but given the high rate of reshaping economics in our countries and economic growth, the timing is very important, and this is of crucial importance. So the timing to set up this energy base, engineering base, can be shortened. We can have shortcuts, and Russia can provide assistance to facilitate in this project implementation. The unified system in our system has backups in generating capacities which were due to development of power generation facilities during the Soviet years, setting up the very economic facilities, and we have about 15 gigawatt only in Siberia, the cushion. So this capacity can be used at the first stage of shaping of the integrated system, which would allow using this timing factor to grow economies which the National Development Program require. Now the electric power is not a luxury any longer. And we have to account for the fact that the availability of energy is a factor of living standard, and the national development programs address these issues, and the United Nations are assigning the top priority to these issues, and undoubtedly this is one of the main things make the energy power available, not only as a supply but also on the cost count. So any citizen of the world should have access to electric power, and every seventh citizens of the Earth doesn't have it, luxury. So this puts forward a challenge for politicians, technicians, to resolve this issue on a quick basis. Another specificity that I'd like to mention deals with the fact that when integrated systems are set up, and first of all, in the Northeast Asia region, we have to account for the distance, and this is the factor. Well, the energy system itself, and of course, sorry, I will jump to another thing. It was already mentioned. Who can do that? Of course, the available electric power can be provided by modern intellectual grids of the super high voltage rating that would allow with minimum losses to deliver the volume of electricity over the distances required. And of course, combining networks and grids that we are developing, accounting for the long distance factor, and Russia is another example. We have 8 time zones. We can make use of this factor, the factor of smoothing peaks in the consumption and developing the cushion of the capacity that would allow saving means of our energy system, and each national system have such a capacity of about up to 50%, which is kept as a backup in the reserves of power generating companies. It was an issue that was raised. What should be done? What important step should be made right now to continue this work and to bring it from discussion stage to the practical plane. It's very important now to trust the science and to put together the scientific support of the project. First of all, it is always useful to be on friendly terms with scientists, and the practice and implication and the development of projects, important projects specifically, regional projects without scientific support is not possible. And the role of science is important in the following. We altogether enter the new technology cycle. And the new technology cycle takes away the time boundary rate hurdles, so the technology should be taking part in this project. And we have to account for the updated models, architectures, and materials, and taking into account the positive experience gained by Russia and gained by our colleagues in Korea and in China, would allow in the shortest time possible develop the modest, not for the 21st century, but for the next century infrastructure that would work according to unified rules, and it will be developed like that to be just a guarantee to supply electric power to any point in our system. We can speak about the Asian Pacific region as a goal of setting up the unified power system. But as a first stage, we are discussing the Northeast Asia, and maybe as a first project, we can speak about the Russia-Korea project, the project that today is being discussed. And we started discussing integration, starting with power bridges, Russia, China, and which is operating quite successfully right now, Russia, Korea, Russia, Mongolia, Russia, Japan. Now it brought up to the next level of developing rings, and now we're going through the spiral, and we have to get back to developing the bridges that proved to be useful and reliable, and they will be a major part of the rings. Also, it is very important to make use of the newest developments of the science and technology in part of synchronizing not only economies but also synchronizing developing information technologies, transmission of power energy, information, and then watts, bytes, meters will work in sync, bringing extra efficiency. That would allow us to improve the economic component, that would allow our economies to work in sync with all infrastructures, information, transportation, etc. When coming back to the issue we discussed today, I think that we have the right composition, and we are authorized to make decision, and the scientists of all our countries, Mongolia, China, Russia, and Japan, just united and gain forces to resolve the issues, and can not only support, but set the vector of development and put together feasibility study that can be put to work out tech specs for the project. And this project can be cloned afterwards at the territories of other continents. Thank you very much.
You laid out a very comprehensive perspective from the Russian point of view. And now I'd like to invite next panelist, Alexander Sergeyev. He is president of the Russian Science of Academy. He is a leader of science in Russia. And it will be very interesting to hear his perspective, how science can support the energy cooperation in Northeast Asia. Dr. Sergeyev, you have the floor.
Thank you very much for introduction, and thank you very much for previous presenter for assigning the role to science in resolving the issues of the efficient power supply in developing economy. I would like to start off with a very simple comparison. Usually it is referred to that the finances are the bloodstream of economy. But finance